Saluton de Budapeŝto, Hungario. Mi estas Stella, kaj la lingvo kiun mi parolas estas Esperanto.
Natika meja matsmukan. Oltenalu seji ilai. Onalu huewa. Saleta weu. Okian. Sluna hafi hapi.
Nino hitaiklia lasto vehtär. Rimonin nainen nanin Nino hitaiklia lasto vehtär. Rimonin nainen nanin
Toki nimi mili jankoisi. Tempo sunoni la mi toki et toki pona tawa sina.
Ești așa hosaborat mersi! Lucra listen al gai, lucra ikara de kara maika. Kiho vegi. Kidlasa!
Kuitlaka haita tsoska.
Demonash. Shihalat de big. Hosochi.
O Magda ha fremen.
Ești așa hosabotat mersi!
Araksa gasa sistru hayata persi.
Tah! Pach tach be! Tach buch! Kerkban be kernisch!
Virnahan okei sendotrakoi. Älä jigessimai, mä vijazeriatin narmai. Bos mä anha bos hal. Hanna vovokak sendotrakoi. Hanna okak ierieri.
Ekua biasa, ekua biama. Nego samonso, nego samonbo.
Lebesen achtap tuaren tok. Dat zal duben achtap.
Leb a senec top do weren top. Let's all do panicked up.
Prawitim dan ganak machin nu gebletot bet kaperekek.
Kag wegene preed.
Hag wegene. Wegonos pridos es esenin.
It may seem strange at first to see all those clips together, but they all have something in common. And chances are you already figured out what it is. Every one of those clips uses a constructed language, or a conlang as they are more commonly called. Now, as the constructed in constructed language implies, conlangs are built under a very different context from naturally formed languages. Naturally formed languages are shaped with very long time spans, usually containing developmental eras in terms of changing of the sounds the language uses, called phonetics, as well as the grammar and vocabulary. Many people through that time formed the language into the way it is spoken currently, and the language can often be very reliant on geographic context. Conlangs differ significantly in that they are created with much less people in a very, very short amount of time, usually by one person or one group of people, a small group of people. Conlangs also hardly ever have contexts that involve the existence of native speakers. However, that is not a hard and fast rule. The one notable example is Esperanto, the most widely spoken Conlang, with around 1,000 to 2,000 speakers native. There was also Dr. Darman Spears, who was a member of the Klingon Language Institute, who tried to raise his son as bilingual with Klingon being his second native language, although he wasn't successful in that endeavor. One aspect of linguistics that both naturally formed languages and constructed language have in common is that both types of languages, as confirmed in a study by MIT, use the same brain processing. Basically, the brain sees no difference in processing when learning, speaking, and listening to either a conlang or a naturally constructed language. The difference between these language types show to mainly be developmental contexts, but the brain sees both language types as simply language. The brain sees both as simply phonetics, grammar, and vocabulary to observe and maybe learn. So as you probably saw in the opening compilation, there were a few different contexts within the existence of conlangs, and these are exactly the way conlangs are categorized. There are 3 main conlang categories as are generally accepted. The first category of conlangs is auxiliary conlangs, also known as auxlangs. Auxlangs are conlangs used for the purpose of increasing communication for people of different groups who don't share a common language. The most widely spoken conlang, Esperanto, is such a language, created in 1887 by Polish Dr. Ludwig L. Zamenhof. Esperanto was designed to be a neutral and equitable language that could be learned easily by people of any language in a short amount of time. So it would be easier for anyone to understand each other. Zamenhof spent most of his college years in Warsaw and Moscow, with both having a very multilingual community. And both his fascination with linguistics and his desire for less miscommunication among the languages are what inspired him to create it. Zamenhof eliminated irregular verbs and arbitrarily gendered nouns, and the vocabulary is rooted in German, Russian, English, and the Romance languages like Spanish, French, and Italian. Most of the particles and conjunctions are from Greek and Latin. One feature Esperanto shows about conlangs is another categorization known as posteriori conlangs, which are conlangs that are heavily built off of currently existing languages. On the other hand, languages that are more independent of their structures, such as Tolkien's Quenya, don't worry, we'll get to Tolkien in a bit, just be patient, are called priori languages. If there is influence from another language in a priori conlang, it is more limited and more fragmented. Esperanto has also shown itself to be an example of a conlang going through the same challenges as naturally formed languages in keeping itself alive, as it has faced criminalization and suppression during the regimes of Stalin, Franco, and Hitler. All 3 of them forbade Esperanto due to fear of it being a spy tool, but Hitler himself forbade Esperanto because he considered it a Jewish language, given that Zamenhof himself was Jewish. With it being the most widely spoken conlang now, and many associations for it existing all over the globe, it is as close as we have gotten to having an international auxiliary constructed language, which can be suggested to be what Zamenhof intended. It was recognized by the United Nations as an international auxiliary language in 1954. Some conlangs for auxiliary purposes are not for the whole world, however. There are a few that are used on a smaller international scale. One example is the Pan-West African auxlang of Gosa. It was created in 1965 by Professor Alex Gosa Igbineweka, incorporating over 200 West African languages to serve, quote, as a linguistic panacea for authentic democracy, peace, unity, identity, political stability, tourism, arts, culture, and science, end quote.
We are now looking towards the federal government of Nigeria to tap these resources and bring Nigeria together. That way, we'll never be talking of breaking up or not breaking up, because Xhosa is a language that comprises all the other languages.
When you think about it, it makes sense for there to be a push for an at least partially Pan-African Conlang. Contrary to Western interpretation, the African continent is vastly diverse with hundreds of languages. Even within a few neighboring countries, a large variety of languages are spoken. So a unifying Pan-African auxlang for international African communication almost feels inevitable, let alone sensible. The same is being shown for Slavic languages. Also called Slavic Esperanto, Inner Slavic is an auxlang that doesn't even require learning if you're fluent in a Slavic language like Polish, Russian, Bulgarian, Czech, Ukrainian, etc. Because if you are fluent in a Slavic natural language, you'll naturally understand 70 to 90% of Inner Slavic by design. It's designed to share the idea of a shared Slavic heritage and stronger Pan-Slavic communication, not to associate itself with any one Slavic country or government. This non-affiliation has even found its way in art through the film The Painted Bird, which there was a short clip of in the opening compilation, as director Václav Marhol explained during the Venice Film Festival.
And of course, I didn't want that the villagers are going to speak Ukrainian or Polish or Russian or something like that, because those people are really bad people. And of course, I didn't want that some nation is going to be associated with that. So I opened the Big Brother, Google, Big Brother, and type Slavic Esperanto. My God, it does exist. It does exist, Slavic Esperanto.
The last example that I will share about the services of auxiliary conlangs before we move on to the next category is that the process of making auxiliary conlangs is becoming prevalent into the revival of nearly dead languages, especially in indigenous communities. Palawakani is an auxlang being used to preserve what remains of Tasmanian Aboriginal languages. So much of those languages have been lost due to suppression of them by colonization efforts. But the little that was recorded, written, or remembered by surviving Aboriginal Tasmanian peoples have been collected to keep a linguistic record of the cultures and tongues that they have. Because of the preservation that the auxlang provided, Palawakani is now being used immensely as a tool for cultural pride and revival for the Aboriginal peoples of Tasmania. The most famous engineered conlang, also being the second most widely spoken conlang after Esperanto, is Tokipona, which was created in 2001 by Sonia Lang. The idea of Tokipona is to test how few words a language actually needs to constitute a fully functioning language. At its most official, Tokipona only has 137 basic words. Another engineered language is Laadan, a tonal engineered language created by Suzette Hayden Elgin in 1982. The purpose of Laadan is to explore the question of the formation of language, being if language is inherently masculine-centric, and if so, what would a feminine-centric language sound like? The third, last, and probably the most well-known category of conlangs is the artistic conlang, also known as artlangs, which are conlangs used for the purpose of artistic and fictional immersion and world building. Okay, now your patience can be rewarded because we can't really talk about artlangs without talking about the Professor Grandpappy of artlangs himself.
I first began seriously to invent languages about when I was 13 or 14. I've never stopped, really. Languages have a flavor to me, which I never understand people saying, for instance, it was awfully dry and dull, because a new language to me is just like taking a new wine or a new sweetmeat or something. What I'm doing now is to try and write in Elvish, because my writing is very inferior to the Elv. Their standard greeting when meeting, a star shines upon our meeting. Oh, God. I made a mistake, didn't I? And that stands for Ellen, Sila, Lumen, Aumenti Elvo. Well, it's a rather beautiful language, I think. I wouldn't mind other people knowing it and enjoying it, but I didn't really want to, like some people who've been equally inventive in language have done, sort of make cults and have people all speaking it together. No, I don't desire to go and have afternoons talking Elvish to chaps. One thing, of course, Elvish is too complicated. I've never finished making it.
Tolkien really is the one we really have to thank for in how we experience and consume artlangs.
To be honest, we should really thank him for a lot of things as we understand them in terms of fantasy, world building, and epic storytelling.
Tolkien also is very fascinating in how he makes Elvish and Khaz'dul into priori languages, even with some specific inspirations from existing languages. Quenya has inspirations from Finnish, Sindarin has Welsh influence, and Khaz'dul uses the three-consonant root system found in Semitic languages like Hebrew and Arabic. Tolkien was also very adamant in his historical world building for Middle-earth to ensure that, like languages in our world throughout history, Elvish also shifted as a product of time. Elvish started off as its own language and then expanded into different dialects.
The Elvish varieties Tolkien fleshed out the most are Quenya and Sindarin, and their words are different in the same way French and Spanish are. Quenya has souk for drink, Sindarin has sog. And as you know, real languages are messy. That's because they change, and change has a way of working against order, just like in a living room or on a bookshelf.
Even if the official intellectual property did not create a full dictionary for the artlang it uses, fandom has shown itself to be a communal part of artlangs as well. Both Klingon and Na'vi started off with an initial amount of words in the initial property, but both languages have had major expansions due to devoted fans. Klingon has had such a big vocabulary since its inception in Star Trek that it got an official translation of Hamlet that was performed that we glanced at in the opening compilation. One example being the language of the Fremen in Dune, Chakobsa. Given the many political undertones about war and the stealing of resources, especially from a major empire, another cultural layer is added regarding what the Fremen represent when you learn that the biggest linguistic influence for Chakobsa is Iraqi Arabic. Another example is Atlantean from Atlantis: The Lost Empire, created by Mark Okrand, who designed it with the idea of what a language early Indo-Europeans would speak, given how in the movie, Milo learns that Kida can understand both English and French through her Atlantean because of the Indo-European roots that English and French share. So why are conlangs so important? Why should more people care about them? I hope this essay makes some of the reasons clear. Conlangs are more prevalent than we usually give them credit for, and the reasons for them are various, and we take part in those reasons more often than we realize. There is the growing demand for stronger comprehension amongst each other as humans become more globalized, and with that, there's more international communication and community, as well as more linguistic tools to preserve surviving cultures. That's the whole point of auxiliary conlangs. As languages evolve, we understand more, especially in the study of linguistics, that languages are complex with so many questions about social order, sociology, anthropology, and so much more, as much as the question of languages themselves. And all these questions and hypotheses are underway while humans are already partaking in language, the need to understand something we all use and in many ways take for granted. Engineered conlangs are here for precisely that reason. Finally, with artistic conlangs, we have another immersive tool of epic proportions for the communal phenomenon of storytelling. Artlangs also provide community in the form of study and fandom for the stories that these artlangs call home. In conclusion, conlangs may come from a different context compared to naturally formed languages, but they fulfill the same purposes of community, understanding, exploration, and artistry. I'm Dash Hantanya.
The funny thing about Tolkien is, like, I get the impression he's very English, but the England he loved was the Anglo-Saxon era that died in 1066. The only English thing he really, really likes is, like, just English village life. He said he was a hobbit, like, he most identified with that. I want the ring to have the voice of Sada from South Park.
I love you.
Yeah, come on.